Hello and welcome back. This is part two, talking about Paleolithic art and leading into Neolithic art. When we last left off, we were talking about cave painting, Paleolithic caves. We covered such topics as, are they truly paintings or are they as much drawings? And we talked about issues of what cave paintings might mean, keeping in mind that primarily we don't really know. But one of the uh, predominant conjectures is the idea that they were part of um, a ritual for kind of envisioning hunting as a kind of a fertility ritual of envisioning good hunts. So, but as I said before, there um, there are some other types of art that we see besides cave painting. We see also drawings on rock cliffs and stuff outside of caves, and we also see a lot of what we would call either totem figurines or votive figurines. The term votive figurine would mean that it was, uh, and once again, this is a guess, speculation based on what we know, that maybe these objects were used for kind of personal or family religious practices. If any of you remember seeing the movie uh, Gladiator, he carries his own personal family gods with him, and this is a practice of keeping small figurines of your gods. It's a practice all over the ancient world, and so it's relatively reasonable to assume that maybe something like that existed in the Paleolithic and Mesolithic and into the Neolithic period. And the most common figurines that we have, these votive and totem figurines, are these Venus figurines. Now, the term Venus, when they were first discovered in the early 20th century, archaeologists and art historians thought, well, these look like fertility figures, so they they kind of named them as if they were the antecedents of Venus cults. So there may be some connection in that they may truly be um, kind of female figure fertility cult objects, like a Venus cult, but obviously, you know, these people who made these creatures had no notion of Venus in the way that classical Greece or the Romans thought of Venus, right? Um, and so these are small figurines, and some of the things that they share in common is that they tend to be very abstracted, very reduced, simplified, and where certain features are exaggerated and other features are almost lost. So in this act of reduction, we barely see the arms on the Venus figure, the Venus right here, the Venus of Willendorf. We don't have feet, although she may have had feet at one point. There's almost no indication of a face to this head, whether that's because the hair headdress is covering the face, or whether it's because she just doesn't have a face. It's not important. We don't really know. But other features of her, all the features that relate to her aspect as a fertility figure, right? All the aspects of her that are related to childbirth and procreation and sexuality are highly heightened. And we can see that same quality in each of the other Venus figures that we're looking at here. Although one of the interesting things is that they get more and more stylized and abstracted through time. So like the Venus of Monros here is 9000 BCE, and it's the most abstracted version of these figures. The Venus of Willendorf, by the way, is the most famous of all of these figures, and it's the one that we will see frequently and see on tests, so it's one to know, one to memorize. But there are lots of Venus figures found all over Europe and into the Middle East from this time period, going from the late Upper Paleolithic all the way to the Mesolithic. Um, by the way, this one, the Venus of Dolni Vestanici, is also the oldest example of fired ceramics that we have. Whether it was purposely fired is unclear. It could have been, but probably more likely it was a clay figure that was created and then it was accidentally fired through, like, falling into a large bonfire or being in a forest fire or something like that. Um, so, Venus figures. We do have other kinds of figures and figurines. I guess another thing I would say about the Venus figures and about a lot of these kind of totem figures is that we have evidence that some of them have holes in them so that they might have been worn, like a talisman or some sort of necklace object. And we have other figurines that are like that, but then some figurines that are clearly not meant to be worn. Um, a lot of the a lot of the totem figures, if they are not of a a fertility goddess type figure, they are usually of animals. And so this kind of connects to what we saw in the cave paintings as well, which is a strong interest in the animal world and seeing animals as being both important because they're things to be hunted, but also important as kind of totem representations of us. We see lots of bison, lots of wild bulls, lots of bears and lions, as well as horses. But also in the Paleolithic world, besides those types of art we also have evidence of jewelry. We also have evidence of creating powdered pigments, possibly to be used for skin painting. And this leads us to talking about how in the things that we see in the Paleolithic, we're also seeing kind of a hint or intimations of what we're going to see in the Neolithic shortly. Um, and so I picked these three images to kind of give you a little bit of a sense of like how we can see a bit of a continuity between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic. In this particular Venus here, with more of an emphasis on Venus as or a fertility goddess figure as also a woman of beauty, that it's a more emphasis on the head and the face. That to a degree also hints at what some of the things we're going to see in Neolithic art or in this kind of Venus figure, where we have this very interesting detail of using a bull horn, where that kind of links also, like in the bull horn is also kind of in a crescent shape. And one of the things that we see in the Neolithic period into the ancient world is this connection between um, bull sacrifice and matriarchal fertility cults and moon worship, all kind of connected. And then with this figure, we see also another thing that we see a lot in some in the Neolithic period, and especially into the early civilization, like in Egyptian art and Mesopotamian art. We see these kind of hybrid, half human, half animal figures. In this case, a lion-headed man. Um, so there are hints in the Paleolithic world of what's going to come in the Neolithic world. And let's just briefly talk about what is the Neolithic. Like I mentioned at the beginning of part one, Paleolithic means Old Stone Age, and then Neolithic means New Stone Age. There's also a kind of a period. We're not exactly it's under great debate as to how long the Mesolithic is between the Neolithic and the Paleolithic. Mesolithic means Middle Stone Age. But by the time we get to the Neolithic, some things have started to really change. The most important thing to remember is that we have the development of agriculture. Okay, well that's where I'll end. In the last part, we will talk just about the Neolithic world and Neolithic transformation / revolution, and we'll talk about the artwork of the Neolithic period. All right, thank you very much.